This is an India Today exclusive. I'm being joined by Mosab Hassan Yousef, also called as the Green Prince. Why is this interview important? He is the son of Sheikh Hassan Yousef, co-founder of the Hamas, and was a Hamas operative himself, then moved to Israel, started working with Israel, worked as an undercover agent until 2007 when he moved base to the United States of America. Today, he will tell us all about Hamas, what is this organization about, and why did he choose to leave Hamas? Thank you so much, Mosab, for joining us here on India Today. Let's begin with a statement that you made at the United Nations, or when you were speaking to people around the United Nations conversations with regards to the recent Israel-Hamas war. And you said that you will live to see the elimination of Hamas. What did you mean by that? And how important is it to eliminate Hamas?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And today is actually Hamas' 36th anniversary. Hamas was founded exactly 36 years ago, today, on December 14th, 1987. And I hope that this year would be the year, the final year in Hamas, and the end of 36 years of violence and destruction, of death and human suffering. I personally would like to see this happen because enough suffering, enough killing of children and civilians for political and religious gain. I think this game really needs to stop now and as soon as possible.
Okay. But when it comes to the United Nations, and if you look at all the conversations around United Nations, I asked you this because you yourself had gone and pleaded the case of why it is important to eliminate Hamas. As a Palestinian, to look at the kind of resolutions at the United Nations with an overwhelming support to bring about humanitarian ceasefire. We do know that they talk about human shields and that Hamas uses civilians as human shields. But at the end of the day, Mosab, in your appreciation, do you think that the actions that are continuing against Hamas in Gaza Strip is not a direct attack against the civilians?
Well, the Hamas is using the Gazan civilians as human shields. This is a war crime, and the civilian casualty in Gaza Strip is basically Hamas' responsibility as the governing authority. People voted for Hamas. People supported Hamas. They gave Hamas cover. People did not condemn Hamas atrocities and all their violence. Hence, the people of Gaza take part of the responsibility, at least I would say moral responsibility for Hamas actions. Hence, today they pay the price. You know, in war, when an entire nation or a society fall from grace and they don't have the ability to condemn a group of savages killing by the name of religion, waging a religious war, a sacred war, a holy war against an entire nation, against another race, by the name of Allah, whatever it is that God is, this is not acceptable. And such a society would pay the price eventually. What were they expecting? To vote for Hamas? As the majority of Palestinians support Hamas. Even today, after Hamas genocide, Hamas committed the genocide of the century. And the Palestinian people, whether they are in Gaza, the West Bank, diaspora, or in the Arab world, all of them agree that Hamas did a holy work. They don't condemn Hamas for their atrocities, for their genocide. So with that said, there are consequences. Yes, it is sad to see the death and destruction, but we need to ask ourselves who originated this and who take responsibility for the use of human shields. It's only Hamas. Hamas started this war. They are the responsible party. And the people of Gaza need to rebel against Hamas. This is their duty.
Well, we'll come back to the civilians, especially children in Gaza. But before that, you yourself were a Hamas operative. Tell us why you quit Hamas.
This was not an overnight decision. It's an evolution. And since my childhood, the distance between me and those savages kept on widening gradually until now, and it's still widening. So it was not just one event that made me make my decision, because Hamas was our project, our family business. In fact, I was profiting from Hamas. Hamas gave me prestige and gave me power. It was my interest. So when I decided to deport Hamas many years ago, it was not an easy thing to do, because I had to go against the family. I had to lose my security. I had to lose my status in the society. I did not see Hamas committing a genocide in the 21st century. That was a long time ago. I warned the world. I warned my own father and Hamas that violence is a dead end. But instead of listening, they shunned me and they made me into a traitor. So that was their decision. Yes.
What were the big events in your life that led you to believe, not just to shun violence, to believe that Hamas is not the way to go? What happened to you personally for you to have changed your mind on staying on with the Hamas, with an organization your father co-founded?
Look, there is no one with a minimum amount of intelligence that see Hamas cruelty and violence and agree with what they are doing. Me, personally, as a child, I was beaten up by Hamas at a very young age. That was their way of indoctrination and discipline, that they wanted me to follow the Hamas order and the Islamic order. I did not like it since I was a child. But later in prison, I witnessed them torture our own people, and I had big problem with them. Again, this is not just one thing about Hamas. Everything was a big event with Hamas. Everything was a fight, was a struggle against those savages. And later on in life, as I became a responsible person for myself, I decided that this is not the path of my life. And again, it was not an easy one because I had something to lose. But I'm very happy that I made this decision and I did not stay in such barbaric organization.
How did your family react to it? Were you considered a traitor? What was the reaction of your mother?
Of course, my family had to disown me. They shunned me. And my people considered me a traitor. They still consider me a traitor. But that was my choice because I knew what the people would label me. The second I step forward and I say no to violence, no to suicide bombing attacks, no to killing civilians indiscriminately. And on the top of that, I said no to the God. I said no to Allah. Well, part of my journey was to re-study Islam and compare it with other religions. Part of my evolution was to study philosophies and religions from the East and the West. And all that widened my understanding of reality, of truth, of divinity. And I found that the very basis, the belief system of Hamas, basically you can say Islam itself had many problems. and nobody was able to answer my questions. Hence, I departed not only Hamas, I also departed Islam as a religion, and I criticized it publicly, which brought lots of shame on the family and made public actually consider me as a public enemy and a traitor. But I'm not concerned of their accusations. I'm grounded in the truth of nonviolence, and I am certain that violence is the dead end. And by trying to annihilate Israel, wiping an entire race because of religion or religious beliefs is absolute absurd.
So you have given up Islam as faith. Have you adopted any other religion?
Well, I don't follow an organized religion, but we can say many religions have inspired me. And I studied the life of many enlightened people. I know a lot about the Indian philosophy, the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, and the concepts of Brahman and Atman. I myself studied yoga. I'm a yoga practitioner for the past 10 years of my life. I follow a method called Ashtanga Yoga. And basically, I studied Christianity prior to that. I studied Judaism. I studied Buddhism. I spent many years studying, and I'm still studying. And in every faith, I find amazing things. I'm not saying that I did not learn anything from Islam. I learned also a lot about discipline. But again, I don't like a certain religion to have monopoly over truth, because there is no such a thing. And I think the diversity of life is what makes it beautiful. And this is actually something that India taught me. Diversity is power. And how many Indians and Indian sects live together in harmony, and many religions in India believe in non-violence and the concept of ahimsa. Hence, I don't like when one religion come with intimidation and aggression and the mean of the sword, trying to dominate the world, saying, our God. It's all hypothetical entities that actually exist only in the head of those believers.
Right. Mosab, coming back to the issue, you just spoke about Hamas, the West Bank. Do you make a distinction between Hamas and Palestine? And if so, when you talk about diversity, do you not see a problem in the occupation or the expansion of Israel into territories that were erstwhile Palestine?
Look, there are lots of lies and falsehood that lead to the violence we are witnessing today. If people were living truthfully and they did not lie to themselves, and they did not build their theories on in the air without any foundation, we would not have this problem. First of all, when you say Israel expanding, there is no such a thing. Israel is a legitimate state. It has been there before the establishment of the State of Israel, the modern democracy that all of us know. It's a nation that is rooted in that region for thousands of years. Throughout the centuries, they did not leave. They were there in small groups or big groups. We witnessed the fall and rise of kingdoms, the fall and rise of many Jewish tribes or entities, but at the end of the day, as a nation, they existed throughout centuries. And this is what's really important, that they are a nation. It doesn't matter, regardless of the form of the government. Now, the problem on the other side with the Palestinians, that they're not nation. They are fighting for a state, but they're not nation. They're not even ethnicity.
Isn't that sad that a two-state solution is still a far cry when it comes to a settlement between Israel and Palestine? And also, America also has been criticizing illegal settlements by Israel. So that there is some truth to the illegal settlements and the fact that the two sides have to come up with a solution. Do you consider two-state solution the real solution to the entire problem?
I think Hamas killed the opportunity of a sovereign Palestinian state for eternity after the genocide they committed on October 7th. I don't think Israel will listen to anybody now compromising their security, because there was an opportunity for the Palestinians to build their state back in 1947. They blew it up. Then in the years to follow, up to Oslo Accords and up to Camp David, when the Palestinians had the opportunity, they were offered the West Bank, the entire land, including East Jerusalem. But Yasser Arafat refused. Because I tell you something, the Palestinian leaders, whether they're Hamas or others, they know how to function as rebels, as revolutionary guards, but they don't know how to be statesmen. The whole Palestinian concept is just a hypothetical concept in the air. And if you really look at the reality on the ground, no one has the authority, not even the United States, to force Israel to do something, because after Israel won the war in 1967 and during the Six-Day War, 1967, Israel captured the West Bank, Gaza, Sinai, and the Golan Heights. Now, you tell me something. If you win the war and you took territory after you've been attacked by the Arab countries, you have the right to this territory. Now, the defeated doesn't have the right to come and claim this land because they lost the land during a war they launched against Israel, and Israel was extremely outnumbered. So since 1967 until now, the Arabs have been trying to regain the land they lost during the 1967 war. And I think this is absurd, because that's it. You lost the war, you lost the land, and Israel has the right to do whatever it wants to do in this land, build a settlement, because, by the way, those are not even settlements. Israel considered the West Bank as the first and most significant defense line. It's a matter of security. It's not a matter of territory. If they give it to the Palestinians, they would compromise their security against 300 million Muslims. And year after year, Israel came to realize that the threat is getting stronger. And this is why Israel was not able to give up the land, the territory, to irresponsible leadership that was not able to control Gaza or to control their own society. How can you? They are not ready, and I don't think that they will ever be.
So what is the objective over here? If the objective is to eliminate Hamas, then there will have to be a solution between Palestine and Israel. But if the objective is to keep Palestine or West Bank and Gaza as buffer zones to ensure security of Israel, then that certainly will not be an acceptable option, not just to Palestine, but to the international community. So what's the objective over here? Elimination of Hamas and then look for a solution? Or continue with the buffer zone where there is no statehood to
priorities,
dignity to the Palestinians living there?
Look, priorities. On October 7, Hamas surprised everybody. And we are still in this mess right now. And I think this is not the time to talk diplomacy or to talk politics, talk solutions, because nobody knows how long this war actually will continue and how much Israel has to pay in blood in order to restore order in Gaza and eradicate those savages. Those savages are bad news for the whole world. And I think Israel is fighting on behalf of the free world, behalf of humanity. Because if we don't defeat this group of Islamists in Gaza, we are going to open the gates of hell where many Islamist groups are going to grow and rise everywhere. We have to prove them wrong in Gaza. We have to eradicate them and show the rest of the Muslim world, the rest of Islamists, no matter where they are, that violence is a dead end. Once we accomplish this, then we can talk about the Palestinian problem. And I tell you something, as someone who grew up in that territory, they don't need a state. What they need education, they need economy, they need infrastructure, they need dignity. Human dignity comes first. The political entity that they are fighting for, it's not even in their interest. It's only in the interest of the politicians who want this conflict to go for eternity. So if we really care
But
for the
people should have
Palestinians,
a choice, Musab. People should have a choice. And over here, people do want a separate state. They do want a state of Palestine, and that cannot be denied. Having said that, you also said that if Hamas, that there are civilians who are supporting the Hamas. But contrary to that, a lot of people believe that if Hamas were eliminated, many in Gaza would actually celebrate. So what is the reality? Do people
no, I
in
think
Gaza
I disagree
want
with you.
Hamas?
You say the people want a Palestinian state. I disagree with you. You know, average person, they're looking for an economy. They want dignity. They want to be able to have a job, to have to be have some income, have
But
school
that
to
can
send
come with
their
the state
children,
too.
have
That can come
infrastructure.
with, but that can come with the state
A
too.
state, look, a state does not guarantee the people anything, and we cannot. The problem that the entire territory we're talking about is like the eye of a needle. It's less than 27,000 square kilometer. You cannot. It's not even enough for one state. If you try to put two elephants in the eye of a needle, it's absurd. This is why it didn't work up to this point. Palestinians, they have their own cities. They can stay in their own cities and govern themselves. Nobody has a problem. But we cannot give them an army. We cannot give them big guns as long as they praise violence. So it has to be a transitional period of time. I'm telling you, Israel will not, as someone who was part of the Israeli counter-terrorism unit, I tell you, I know them. It's impossible that they're going to give the Palestinians power, territory just overnight. It has to be a transition between this crisis until stability, total stability, where we know that there is a strong Palestinian leader and accountable to his own people, that is not going to gamble with the entire society for a game power. Then after that, we will be able to talk about possibly a territory exchange, a middle ground. But right now, nobody has this authority. We can write all the proposals, and we will be just disconnected from reality. The war has to finish
How,
first. And
how do you think,
after that,
Mosab, Hamas will, the civilians in Gaza would react if Hamas was eliminated? Will they be happy about it? Will they feel the sense of freedom? Or do you think majority of them continue to support Hamas in Gaza?
look, there is not going to be Hamas in Gaza anymore. It's just a matter of time. And what's happening in Gaza is total destruction. Post-war, there is not going to be any infrastructure left. Gaza is destroyed. And I don't know how the people are going to actually, when they wake up to that reality and see how devastating was Hamas' rule over Gaza. Hamas takes responsibility 100% for what happened. So with that said, I don't know if the people will celebrate that actually the war is over. Will they celebrate that Hamas is over? Will they just be relieved that there is no more shooting and there is no more death? It is going to be, most importantly, very important that we rid the world of Hamas. And I hope that the Gazan people will be able to self-determination and to be able to rule themselves, have an honest, selfless leader who would heal their wounds, that they would actually drop their idea of violence or any violent leadership and just accept Israel's right to exist. This is the most
Right.
important thing that the Palestinians, before they think about a Palestinian state, they need to accept their neighbors' right to exist. If they keep insisting on annihilating the state of Israel, they will suffer, they will make everyone else suffer.
Two questions before I let you go, Mosab. The fact that since Hamas took over in Gaza politically, how did that really come about? Was it not, in a way, accepted by the others, including Israel, to undermine Mahmoud Abbas? And did that card really play well for Israel or for the international community or the region?
I did not. What is the question?
That Mahmoud Abbas's authority as in the West Bank and Gaza was undermined by propping up Hamas as a political opponent to the Palestinian Authority, and today the world is suffering the consequences of that. How do you see this, where a political dispensation, that where a Hamas, a revolutionary or a resistance group, came about to become a political entity in this region?
Look, Hamas was founded in 1987. But prior to that, there was the Muslim Brotherhood. And this is actually what Hamas is. Hamas is the legitimate baby born of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood is the mothership. And the Muslim Brotherhood have been there since mid last century. They were founded by Hassan al-Banna in Egypt, and they are the biggest Muslim organization in the world with more than 100 million active members worldwide. They are in the United States, they are in Europe, they are everywhere. So basically, Hamas was only a branch, a tactical move of the Muslim Brotherhood to separate Hamas Palestine or the Muslim Brotherhood Palestine, because they were meant to use violence against Israel, and they wanted to do that to protect the mother movement. But at the end of the day, they share the same ideology, the same leadership. They are the same organization. So if you think for a moment that Hamas creation happened in 1987, this was just a trick, let's say. This is a trick they played. They were there way before the establishment of Hamas. So some people come up with the theory that Israel created Hamas in order to compete against the Palestinian Authority, and now they are paying the price. This is just a conspiracy theory. It has nothing to do in reality. At some point, Israel was interested to see an opposing force to the PLO and how that would play in the political arena. But Israel cannot control. Israel cannot create this organization, and it's the end of the day, it's the choice of the Palestinian people. Those are the ones who made the choice. But I tell you something, Hamas thrived through violence. Yasser Arafat, after 40 years of fighting, came to realize that violence was not taking him anywhere. So he signed on the Oslo Accords. He came back to the Palestinian territories. Hamas was out of the game. Nobody included Hamas in the game. They refused to reconcile. So they launched many suicide bombing attacks, which eventually sabotaged the peace process. If there was anyone who assassinated the peace process, it was Hamas. And the more violence they committed, the more extreme members or individuals became on the other side in Israel, which brought the extreme right wing and made them a lot stronger in Israel. So this is how Hamas thrived through violence, and that weakened the left wing in Israel and weakened the Palestinian movement that believed that the best way is through negotiations and through the peace process. So basically, we can come up with all type of theories about this, but the truth is that Hamas really thrived through violence, and here we are. They killed every hope for peace in the region.
Final question to you. In a historic move, the United Nations Secretary General invoked Article 99. In his entire tenure, he never had invoked this article, and under which the United States of America vetoed the resolution calling for a humanitarian ceasefire, saying that the resolution does not condemn Hamas. Having said that, at the end of the day, we are looking at the international community, majority of the countries coming together to save lives of civilians, particularly women and children. How do you look at the idea of the need to save civilians when it comes to women and children and the process that is underway at the United Nations? Are you disappointed with the international community?
No, not at all. Actually, I was against the ceasefire, and I'm still against the ceasefire, because you cannot call a humanitarian ceasefire that does not include the hostages, because the Israeli hostages in Gaza are also humans. They are the victims of this entire attack. And how can we call this a humanitarian ceasefire if it does not have a condition of the immediate release of all hostages? So if the humanitarian ceasefire proposed by the United Nations Security Council included the hostages release, then it would be actually a good one. But this ceasefire meant to give Hamas a lifeline. And this is why I was against it. Yes, we know there is civilian casualties, but who is responsible for that? Hamas is responsible for that because they use the civilians as human shields. So how can we call for a ceasefire without condemning Hamas, taking civilians as human shields, and not including the hostages who are somewhere under the ground where Hamas is negotiating to release mass murderers back to the street? Hamas wants 5,000 terrorists, murderers, to be released from Israeli prisons in exchange for 130 Israeli innocent civilians held in Gaza. Hence, it's not as easy as that. You know, you do a ceasefire, you give Hamas a lifeline, and the hostages in Gaza will be forgotten, and Hamas will stay in power.
You think the hostages will ever be forgotten? I thought the ceasefire was to start negotiating a swap again.
Yes, well, this is what Hamas wants. Hamas wants negotiation. Hamas is desperate for the ceasefire because they want to be recognized as a counterpart, as a legitimate body, while they are nothing but a savage terrorist group just committed a genocide. So how can a democratic country sit down across on the table negotiating with savages like this who want to release mass murderers from Israeli prisons? So basically there is no negotiations. Remember, Hamas leader in Gaza who orchestrated this entire attack and destabilized the whole region, his name is Yahya Sinwar. This guy was released back in 2011 as part of the Gilad Shalit prisoner exchange. And look what he did. So can you imagine if we release 5,000 of his kind back to the street, next war, hundreds of thousands of people will die. So nobody can afford this. The United States understand this, even though it sounded horrible of the United States to veto the ceasefire, which made the United States look like a monster. But there are so many things to take in consideration. We cannot do a ceasefire without the unconditional release of all the hostages. No exchange.
Right.
We cannot release murderers back to the street. Then second, we cannot have a ceasefire with Hamas. They must be eradicated. If we don't want to risk another war in Gaza in the future, we have to remove Hamas from power, no matter what this is going to cost. And by the way, we're not far from that goal, God's willing.
And even the leadership in Qatar, are we looking at that?
Look, those people, everybody who got involved in the October 7 genocide, there is no escape for them. Consider all of them dead men walking. It doesn't matter how far they go, even if they are on Mars. We are going after them. I am including myself. They are not going to get away unpunished. They just committed a genocide of the century. This is not a joke. And people like this cannot get away with their crime.
Mosab Hassan Yousef, many thanks for joining us here on India Today.
Thank you.